All right, our agenda today is we're going to go through a number of areas, but we're going to spend most of our time on a demo and also answering your questions. But we're going to try and answer the what is agentic AI. We're going to talk about declarative versus custom agents. And also, in the process of building your agent, what different maturity levels and tips about building them for your very first one. We're going to walk through this first, but then we're going to do it for you. So let's go ahead and hand it over to Jim. Jim, take it.
Thank you, everybody. I'm glad we could all get together today to talk a little bit about agents, which I think everyone is top of mind, whether you actually built them or have seen people build them or thinking about building them. So let's first talk a little bit about what this journey could look like. So if we zoom out for a second, every organization that I've talked to, and it's been a lot of organizations over the last 16 or 12 to 18 months, whether they're big, they're small, whether they work in regulated industries or they're scrappy little startups, has the same reality. We're on an AI journey. And the important part is this isn't a light switch moment. It's a maturity curve, more like learning to drive than necessarily downloading an application. So in phase one is where most people actually start this journey. Every employee has an AI assistant that helps them work better and faster. So this is where Copilot is just that. It's your Copilot. It drafts, it summarizes, it organizes, and accelerates your individual productivity. The humans in this situation stays firmly in the driver's seat. You ask it questions, it responds, you decide what to do. Good examples here, you turn meeting notes into something meaningful. You rewrite an email so it doesn't sound like you've taken the negative tone out of it that you know will get you in trouble. Phase two is where we get more interesting. And this is where agents join the team as we consider digital colleagues. And then in this phase, they take on specific tasks at human direction. So instead of everyone prompting individually, and this is where it's really important, you create what we call purpose-built helpers that behave consistently. Humans are still directing the work, but the agent now can take on repeatable tasks similar to a junior teammate. So this is an example here would be, for instance, an HR policy assistant, which is actually the demo we're going to do, where it can answer questions using approved sources of information. And then finally, we get to phase three, which is really the most advanced phase. And this is where humans set the direction and the agents run the entire business process and the workflows, and we check in as needed. This doesn't mean the AI is going to run the company, right? It means that the agent operates a workflow end to end with boundaries. And it escalates when it hits uncertainty or any policy constraints. Humans move at this phase from doing tasks to actually supervising the outcomes. This phase is about really the process efficiency and scale. There's less manual coordination, fewer handoffs, and fewer human errors or oop, I forgot it kind of moments. The thing you want to take away from this is that the journey is progressive. And the reality of the situation is some companies may find themselves in all three phases at once. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a quick reality check. People use the terms co-pilot, assistant, and agent very interchangeably, but they're really not. And the difference matters because it changes really the risk, the governance, and the trust model. So that's really the core of this. The difference between an assistant and an agent centers around autonomy, risk, and responsibility. Copilot, as a copilot, is an assistant that helps us do work. It informs, it accelerates decisions, but it doesn't do anything unless we take the final step. It responds to our prompts. It's great at doing drafting and summarizing and explaining and analyzing things. It's best suited when you want something that's going to shine in knowledge work, decision support, writing analysis, and planning. The bottom line on that is it's the coworker who can crank out, for instance, the first draft in 20 seconds is the one who's really taking advantage of the assistant. The agent being different, think about it this way, it's the tool that doesn't just help you think, but it can take action on your behalf, but under specific rules and guidelines. So agents can execute predefined tasks. They can monitor and trigger and follow workflows. They can operate within specific constraints and approvals. And they're best suited for where you want to take advantage of repetitive work that potentially needs cross-system coordination, needs potentially some monitoring or triage or follow-up, or where you're doing automation with accountability. And that's very important to stress, with accountability. We don't have the ability to do a show of hands out there, but I'd just be interested in knowing how many of us, and I can raise my hand, have something they could define as a repeatable checklist. That's really where an agent would come into play. So next slide, please. Thanks. So we're not going to try and get you too in the weeds here, but it is important to understand how these things work. So when we say an agent, we just don't mean a smarter chat window. We basically mean a scoped version of Microsoft 365 Copilot that can run parts of a business process through tools and information that the organization already trusts. So if we were to walk through this diagram a little bit of an anatomy of an agent, the first thing we see at the top is the user experience. Think of this as the application, the front door. This is where someone asks a question, they request a task, or we get a trigger to a workflow. A good agent experience is predictable, and people will learn how to talk to it because it responds in a very consistent style. An agent that kind of changes his mind and looks different every single time, not a good experience. At the center of the agent is something we call the orchestrator, or if you want to think of an analogy, the traffic controller. It's the brain that decides what to do next, how to pull information from your knowledge sources, how to pull in skills that AI might already have, to be able to ask clarifying questions of the person prompting it, or in some cases to stop and then hand it back to a human if it reaches its limits. The knowledge is really what we ground the agent with. It's the sources of information. This is so that the agent essentially doesn't make things up. We give it the knowledge set. The skills themselves are what an agent is trained to be able to do beyond just answering questions. For instance, triggering a workflow, being able to look up certain data, being able to generate a standardized output based on a set of instructions you provided, or basically moving a process forward and maybe even handing it off to another system. So you can think of the skills as like the agent's tool belt. And then at the autonomy layer, this is really the dial. This is where when you have low autonomy, it can retrieve and summarize things. But when you have high autonomy, this is where it can plan steps, it can coordinate actions, and then check in when it needs to confirm that what it's doing is actually acceptable. At the bottom there, we do see the foundation models. You can think of them as language models that do the reasoning, but to the agent, there's more than just the model. It's really the vehicle for how things get done. So if you've heard the models such as OpenAI or Claude or Gemini, those are the foundation models which the agent uses. And then lastly, there are other agents. So as you get more sophisticated, your agents can work together as a team where each agent has a very specific purpose. And if an agent reaches the end of its knowledge set, it can hand off to another agent that is trained on that specific task to complete it. So this is where we can, again, create some really interesting interplay with these agents. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about types of agents. And we're going to go into several different categories. Agents themselves exist on a spectrum. Different organizations are at different stages in their transformation. We already saw that in that first slide. Some are advanced at building the next generation of agents with autonomous capabilities, while others are still building the retrieval agents. So if we were to really break this down, a retrieval agent is nothing more than an agent that's been given very specific instructions on how to behave, the personality they're intended to take on, and the overall objectives of what they're supposed to accomplish. They follow predefined rules, predefined guidelines, and they're set by their creators. That's what we're going to start with today and the agent that we're going to build. Task-based agents are connected to specific workflows or processes within your business. They operate based on knowledge and skills. We saw from the anatomy of an agent on the last slide. They are rule-based like retrieval agents, but their primary purpose is to automate some sort of repetitive task. something that needs to occur on a regular routine basis, whether it's reviewing invoices or emails, whether it's setting up new accounts in your organization or an onboarding process, similar to those things. Now, an autonomous agent is one that can operate independently. They usually are set off by a trigger. They can also dynamically plan and learn from their own actions over time, and they can adapt to challenging conditions and circumstances. And in some cases, depending on the sophistication of autonomous agents, actually make decisions without constant human intervention. Not to say human intervention at all, I just not constant human intervention. That, though, assumes that we've gotten to a certain trust level. As it relates to the two different types of agent options when you're building them, there are declarative agents and then there are custom agents. On the left, we have declarative agents. They run inside the Microsoft 365 platform. So they inherit your identity, they inherit your permissions, and they inherit your security model. They're defined mostly by instructions and behaviors that you declare, hence why they're called declarative agents. And the big advantage is to them that they're fast to value, they have built-in governance and auditability, and they're bound to, but the kind of the downside to that is that they are bound to the platform's capabilities. So whatever M365 can do is what you're limited to by the declarative agents. Custom agents on the right-hand side here, these are built on custom AI stacks where the organization can control every piece of it: the orchestration, the integration with line of business applications, the runtime behavior, the ability to automate across systems, you name it, the models they use, where they're going to show up, whether they're going to be able to show up in an external website or into an application, you name it. Now, the benefits here is that you have a lot more control and you have a lot more ability to integrate. The downsides typically with custom agents is higher build and maintenance cost, as well as you own more of the governance and security responsibility, which a lot of organizations may not be mature enough to handle just yet. Next slide, please. So do's and don'ts for declarative agents. So we're going to go down this pathway of doing a declarative retrieval agent. So on the do's side here, the first thing is when you're using a declarative design, define the tasks and goals at a very high level. You want to describe the intent, but you're not scripting every single keystroke. This is not coding. You want to be, because the AI is going to be able to fill in the blanks for you. The next thing is be explicit about the capabilities and behaviors. If you don't tell the agent how to behave, it's going to make it up. And guessing is going to erode trust, and it's going to create some unpredictability in each time you use it. So in this case, it's just as important to tell it what you want it to do as you do to want it to tell it what you don't want it to do. Keep your workflows readable and maintainable. So remember, if someone leaves the organization and they built an agent, it should be something that they can read and interpret through regular human language. If a human can't follow it, then you can't really govern it. And then the other thing there is use knowledge retrieval and guardrails. Ground the agent in only approved data and then define the boundaries so it knows where to stop. What I like to do, and I'll show you in the demo, is I want to always give it the source files and tell it, stay here. Do not go look for any other information. Even though you have this amazing capability to span the entire organizational information or the web, I don't want you to do that. I just want you to use the knowledge sources I gave you. These practices are about clarity, safety, and repeatability. On the don't side, we have don't use low-level step-by-step scripting. Again, this is no code. We're not creating robotic process automation here. We also don't want to overload the agents with unchecked powers. Just because we can connect everything doesn't mean we should. I like to keep an agent to a specific single task. If I need to do another task, I'll build a different agent and link them together. Don't create messy or hard to read processes. The same, it's the opposite of keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS. In this case, if I can't read it and understand it through natural language, we probably made it too complicated. And never skip permissions, right? We want to make sure that we are keeping within our governance guidelines. Permission shortcuts are going to be a recipe for disaster. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Greg. He's going to talk a little bit about some clarity and trust, and then we will get into our demo.
Absolutely. All right. The big thing is we've all seen Skynet, so we all have trust issues when it comes to AI, but that doesn't mean we can't plan for that and put in appropriate guardrails. Jim had already hit on this, but you definitely want to make sure that when you're building agents, that you're starting with a clear job and that you're keeping the task very narrowly defined, right? The KISS principle definitely applies here. And you don't want to try and boil the ocean. That's gonna get you into an analysis paralysis, especially with the type of agents we have today. You're gonna write things in natural language, but it's almost like you're having the agent apply for a job, and the job is that task, right? So you want to be very descriptive. You're not writing a resume or a CV, you're writing a job description. So, like what tools match the tasks that you need. Make sure you don't try and use tools that weren't really designed to do what you're thinking that you want to do with that agent. You can definitely get off onto a tangent. And these agents are going to prompt you for information or clarity. And you want to encourage that, and you want to prompt for that, because if you let it guess, 9 times out of 10, when it guesses, it hallucinates, right? And just anything, you want to be testing. And then when you're done testing, you want to test a little bit more. And you want to have other individuals test it, because you, as the creator, aren't the best tester. You're not going to find the corner cases, or you're not going to find the exceptions. So you want to give it to somebody else to put it through the paces. There are principles around governing M365 Copilot. Zero trust is one of the best strategies, especially when you start getting into computer use or any of those type things in agents. And you want to make sure that your privacy and security and compliance requirements are so you want to make sure that you have those written down and have discovered those. You want to use end-to-end security. So that's much more than just MDR or having something on your computer. You want to have specific security that wraps itself around what you're working on and is designed to work with it and not prevent it. And then from a governance model, you want to make sure that these agents stay within the boundaries of conduct and your specific regulatory policies or compliance policies that affect your organization, right? You need to be very explicit and make sure that you share that with the agent, so it's not guessing, right? You want to share your code of conduct and reliability policies. So to wrap this up, you want to make sure that all of your users are accessing the agent with authentication and authorization that meets security best practices, MFA, conditional access, those type things. So you'll be using the Microsoft Entra with Copilot, Entra DP1. You also want to make sure that you're using sensitivity labels for the data that it has access to, and that you have data loss prevention around that. It's very out of mind that an agent would turn around and email a list of social security numbers to somebody on the internet, but it's not out of the possibility. So you want to have a second level to catch that. And then you also want to, in your organization, and this is a big part of your policy, your AI policies, is to try and make sure that people aren't using other agents that aren't allowed, or other software that may interact with your agents that will, cause harm or cause unexpected results, right? So that's actually going to fall into the Microsoft Defender and the Entra. And then you want to be licensed for all of these licenses that we've added here. Now, if you are M365 Business Premium, or you are E3 or E5, basically, if your license starts with an M, then you are using a modern license, and it should include pretty much everything on the screen here, with some slight exceptions. But M365 Business Premium, M365 E3, M365 E5, you want to use those SKUs. If you're using the O SKUs, I say the O SKUs, O stands for old. Those are not going to have the protections in it for your particular agent. So now let's go to the main event. And we're going to have Jim actually is going to go through, share his screen, and he's actually going to build an agent, and he's going to show you how to do it. Take it away, Jim.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Appreciate it. Rebecca, do you mind giving me share presenter capabilities? There we go. Perfect. Let me bring up my screen. That is the one I want. So the main event, this is what you're all here for. We're going to take on a fictitious role here at a company that we use in our proof of concept environment called TechSphere Solutions. TechSphere Solutions has a people team website, SharePoint, and they have a document library that consists of all of their policies for their employees. And you'll notice they're very well laid out here. They all say policy. Keeping in mind, data cleanliness, data hygiene matters. So if your data is all over the place and you have lots of different versions of files, that's something you need to focus on to make sure that the quality of the output you get is as good as possibly could be expected. So I'll be honest with you, we created all these documents using AI for the purpose of this demonstration. We said we're a company, we gave it some description and said, go ahead and create all these policies for us. So what we want to do now is we're going to come over here to M365 Copilot in the chat interface. Now, this interface can be accessed through the web at m365.cloud.microsoft. It can be accessed through the downloadable app from the Microsoft Store, the M365 Copilot app. It can be accessed in Teams. It can be accessed in Outlook. There's various places you can access it. Luckily now the interface is united and aligned across all these platforms. There was a time when things would show up on one side or the other side depending on which version you were in. So what we want to do is create one of those declarative retrieval applications that can query our HR data and give us some responses. We want to make it so that the HR team is not being distracted so much with questions that people can answer themselves. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hop out here to this interface, and I'm going to come over here to my left-hand navigation pane, and you're going to see this button right here that says New Agent. Remember, you do need to have the paid M365 Copilot version if you want to be able to share this agent. When I open up this agent interface initially, it takes me to this Configure tab. If you've created agents before, this is great. You could probably start coming in here giving it instructions. If you're new to this, Microsoft used to land you on the Describe page. And the Describe page really gives us an ability just to tell Copilot what we want to create in natural language and have it start building it for us itself. I find this very powerful, and quite honestly, it's gotten so much better over the many months that Copilot has been about. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my prompt. I'm going to drop it in here to the chat window. And I'm going to basically say, I want an agent that can retrieve answers from our corporate repository of policies and HR handbook. And I'm telling it the data is stored in SharePoint. So at this point, we're going to do a little bit of back and forth, and it's going to ask me for some clarifying information and start building out my agent for me. After we complete this, I'm going to show you another way to get instructions built for you that I also do quite frequently as well. But this is the one I would say that if you're new to this is the best method to do. We'll go ahead and hit the enter button. It's still called the enter button, the submit button. I don't know. So at this point, Copilot is thinking about what I've asked and about the parameters of what would make an agent that could respond to this specific requirement. So it says, okay, we're going to call it the Policy and HR Handbook Finder. It's ready to help employees retrieve answers. We've enabled the capability to be able to search all SharePoint and OneDrive files so the agent can access your policy. We've added conversation starters over here to help people to get started, leave policies, expense guidelines for work, remote work, and benefits. And the next thing it's asking is, I have a specific SharePoint URL for where this stuff lives. Can you give it to me? Yeah, that's great. This is, again, goes back to the sources. So I'm going to copy the URL from my people site. I'm going to drop it in here and say, this is, drop that in there. Notice, because I'm using Copilot, it already knows that. It doesn't put the full URL. It actually resolves it to the name of it. I'll go ahead and hit enter at this point. Give it a chance to think. It was always fun. We'd have Greg come on and tell a dad joke, but he's been banned in many states for doing that. It shouldn't take too much longer.
Jeopardy theme song.
We could, but we won't. So you can see, like I said, it starts to fill out all of this for you right away. And so it's thinking about this, and it should be done pretty quickly. What you'll notice over here is we don't trust the demo guides completely. I did build one earlier over here in my agent panel. Okay, it says the SharePoint URL is now added as a knowledge source. The SharePoint document source successfully included. I will retrieve answers. If you have other URLs or additional knowledge sources, you can provide them at any time. If I'm ready at this point, I can click Create up here in the right-hand column, and I can get started. But what I wanted to do is actually let you see behind the scenes in the configure page. So in the configure page, you can see, gave it a name. If you don't like it, change it. You could actually change it after the fact too to edit it. Here's a description of what it does. We'd get 1,000 characters if we wanted to. And down here is where it provided me the instruction set. And notice how it's laid it out. This is in markup language, and AI really enjoys reading things in very sectioned off areas to understand what it's supposed to do. So you can see it gives a purpose, gives a general guidelines, the skills, the step-by-step instructions, and also, this is really great. This is something that hasn't done when we first started using these, and that's around error handling and limitations, right? So if information cannot be found, state this clearly and avoid speculation. That's to build the trust, right? Do not provide opinions or advice outside of the official policy documents. Here's an example of an interaction. So it's good to provide the agent examples of what you want the output to look like. And then over here, you can see there's a follow-up and closing. Offer to help with related questions or direct to HR if more guidance is needed. And you'll notice here, non-standard terms clearly define any unique terms from corporate policy if referenced by the user. This is great. For all intents and purposes, this is probably enough for what we're trying to accomplish. Now, what I will say, and Greg mentioned this, when you create an agent, you want to hand it over to some people to test it out and take it around the block a few times, kick the tires to see if it's performing and behaving to the extent that you hope it will. If it isn't, we can always make some adjustments and fine tuning. But you'll also notice we have the ability to create an icon. We can also create an agent from a template. These are all Microsoft pre-built agents. So if you wanted to do that, you could, although I haven't really done that too much myself because usually it's something beyond what those are. But if I click this little pencil icon, I can upload an icon for it, or I can even use AI to create and generate the icon for me. So I'm going to go on based on the description and the instructions. This is nice. This makes it stand out a little bit more easily amongst all the other agents you may be deploying. I have noticed this is a little buggy sometimes. And sometimes when it creates the icon and you go ahead and try and update your agent, it errors out. What I've typically done is just kind of screen scrape the graphic it provided and then saved it to my desktop and re-uploaded it. I assume that Microsoft's going to fix that at some point. But now you'll see it's creating this little agent. If we had time, I'd love to talk to you about how visual or image AI works. It's very fascinating, but we don't have time for that today. Check back for another webinar. All right, so it's creating this little image that has an HR document with a little spyglass. I'll click apply. Up here, it'll auto save, and it actually worked this time. Hey, all right, so now that we're ready to go, we can click create, and it will create my agent. And once it creates that agent, what it's going to do is ask me if I want to share that agent. Now, the cool thing about this, remember, this is a declarative agent. That's a retrieval agent. So it lives within the platform that is Microsoft 365. I can't share this with people outside my organization, but I can limit it to certain groups. So if I go ahead and say click share, you'll see I can share it to anyone in my organization, only specific users, or I can make it so this is only mine. So I'm going to go ahead and say specific users. And I know there's a user I want to test this. I'm going to let Mia Chen test this for me. We can copy the link and send it to her, and I'll click continue at this point. You'll notice that it is making sure that she has access to the proper location. Notice it says this is going to give access to files and folders of people you invite to use this agent. Access is not revoked when you remove them from this agent. That's very important. Remember. So save at this point. It's going to share the agent. It's granting the access they need to the location of the documents. We'll click close. We will go ahead now and we will update it. And we'll go ahead and go to the agent and start asking it some questions. Actually, before we do that, there's one other thing I wanted to show you. And that is how you create an agent using Copilot. So here's my build. It's going to take a minute to load. I also like to use sometimes Copilot or other generative AI to help me write the instructions for my agents. So the way I do this is if I just go to a new chat and I give it a prompt, I can say things something like, I want to build a Microsoft 365 Copilot no-code agent that can retrieve answers from my blah, blah, blah. It's all the same stuff as before. Help me write, though, an instruction set to create a first-class user experience. So I'll go ahead and click go at this point. And what we want to see here is how much different the instruction set is from the one I created before. Don't be afraid to adjust these. You can go back in and edit your instruction sets or add different resources at any time. Okay, so you can see the person I'm actually impersonating here is someone known as Alex Rivera. And you'll notice down here is my official instructions. Notice it is breaking it down into sections just like it did when I built it through the agent interface. It looks a little bit different. There's a style and tone, there's safety and compliance, there's more examples. Right. So again, pick your preference, whatever you're comfortable with. I do want to quickly go back to the one we just built though, because I did want to show you a couple other things before we go in and actually issue some commands. We're good on time, I can see that. So you'll notice, again, I'm in the interface. I can come back in at any time. I can change the icon. I can change the instructions. What I didn't show you down here is its knowledge sources. So you'll notice that down here is where I've indicated the location of the documents. I can add other files or URLs up here, including external websites. But this is where we get to dial in the constraints of the agent. And so I want it to only use the specified sources. If I don't check that, or if I tell it to search all websites, it theoretically, if it's not following my instructions properly, go and just say, okay, I'm going to go look at other information in the organization. I found a policy in a different location, or I went to the web and searched for something on your website. And now it's starting to give responses that are not consistent. So keep that in mind. Now, you may want it to do that, but in most cases, you probably want to limit it. The other thing you can do is give it access to your org chart and someone's profile information. This can be very helpful, especially if it's answering questions that the responses may be improved by understanding a little bit more about that individual, who they report to, what their title is. So I do like to check that one as well. And then lastly, you can decide whether or not you want it to be able to create content. So if you wanted to be able to create Word documents or Excel spreadsheets or PowerPoint files or graphs and charts and those types of things or images, you can choose these options. That's not really the intent of this agent, so I'm going to leave that blank. And down here, you can also add in additional suggested prompts as well. Notice it created four for us, but at any time I could go ahead and prompt and I could create an additional one if I wanted to. But right now, I'm pretty happy with that. Last thing I wanted to show you here is up here in the little ellipsis. This is something that was added in the last few weeks. You now have the ability to take this agent that you built, this declarative retrieval agent, and move it into Copilot Studio. If you think you want to start to build in more task-based or workflow-based stuff. So the nice thing is you can graduate from this to actual full Copilot Studio, still no code, maybe low code, very easily by simply clicking this button and graduating your agent into a more advanced capabilities. All right, so let's go ahead and use it. Let's go ahead and click over here. You'll notice I can click on the actual ones that it provided me, but I actually have some prompts that I want to provide myself. First question I'm going to ask is, how many PTO days do I get at 4 years? Again, I didn't say 4 years of what, so it does have to make some assumptions here. If I'm talking to you as a human, you're probably assuming 4 years of employment. So let's get it a chance to respond and see how well it does. There we go. PTO entitlement 4 years. According to the PTO policy, employees with 3 to 5 years receive 20 PTO days per year. Since you're at 4 years, you fall right into this band. And it gives me a little bit of quick reference to the rest of the policy, summarizes it, quick, simple answer. And you'll notice down here, I can actually see the source information where that came from. Here's the citation, and there's some additional things that might also be beneficial. How are we doing on time? Oh, good. Okay, I'm going to ask a question about a very specific question to the region where Texas is located. So it's asking a question, can I use PTO during Nevada family leave? This company, fictitious company, is based in Nevada. Okay, we'll go ahead and see what the response is there. Now, bear in mind, this is very powerful. We only spent a few minutes. And if you think about the benefit to your organization to be able to build something like this very rapidly, it's going to probably require you to do some data cleanup and maybe redata organization, updating policies. But the time saving on your HR department could be tremendous, and the ability to get immediate responses for your users can be fairly impactful. So yes, you can use PTO during your Nevada family leave. Both relevant policies confirm this. So from the PTO policy, it says the policy explicitly states PTO can run concurrently with family leave. It's under this section of the document. From the family leave policy, employees may elect to use accrued PTO concurrently. And it basically gives a description of what that means. So now I'm going to ask some even deeper questions here. So I'm going to ask it to summarize all the policies that require approval from a VP. Now, what this means is it's going to have to look across all the policies and aggregate the answers to anything it might see that would require the approval from a vice president. Notice right down here, it does do some suggested prompts. By all means, I would encourage your users to use these if they make sense. When you get to something like Copilot Studio, you can guide more of these choices and selections as it relates to what people see. When you're using a no-code agent, it's really what the AI thinks would be an appropriate next question, right? So if you want more control over it, that's where you would want to start using something like Copilot Studio. Okay, let's see. Looking through, thinking. Now you'll notice, okay, the PTO policy says that you need a VP approval for any PTO carryover. We all know that one, right? A client gift policy, so anything that's is required for any gifts over $100 to a client. Total annual limit is 150 per client. Any single gift exceeding 100 will trigger a fee sales approval. And it gives me even a table there of a summary information. Pretty cool stuff. Last question we'll ask, and then we'll go to Q&A. And this is very apropos to AI. And that is, we want to understand what no, that's not the right one. Sorry. We want to, come on, there it is. We want to understand the AI governance policy. So hopefully we all have one of those. If you don't, that's definitely something ProArt can help you with. Thanks, everybody. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.